Stiff hamstrings are a very common thing that I'll see in the clinic. It's kind of beyond the scope of what I want to cover today as to what can lead to stiff hamstrings. There are numerous causes. It's not always just a tight muscle. Again, beyond the scope of what I want to cover, but they can have a huge implication in not only the performance of the athlete, but as well as their robustness and if they're able to avoid breaking down during the season or even in their training sessions in the weight room. So one thing I do want to highlight, if you have stiff hamstrings, number one thing that it could affect is your deadlift setup position. So if you have stiff hamstrings and you can't get into this good hip hinge position, what you're most likely going to end up doing is your hamstrings will max out and you're going to get this much more rounded back position. Not quite ideal. You're putting a lot more load through the lower back at that point instead of the hip joint that's more optimally designed to handle that. You could see the same thing as well if, let's say we have a soccer player and they go to kick a ball. If they don't have ideal flexibility and mobility through their hamstring musculature, they're going to bend through the back a lot more. And you add that up over a season, the numerous times that an athlete might kick a soccer ball, they're going to develop some back pain potentially over the course of the season. So stretching the hamstrings, pretty simple. I'm going to show you a couple things that we can do to kind of get a little bit more bang for your buck when stretching out the hamstrings. So to begin with, what we don't want to do when stretching the hamstrings, and a common fault that I see a lot of people fall into, is doing something like this or doing a hurdler stretch where you're down on the ground and trying to reach and touch your toes. The problem there is instead of actually stretching out the hamstrings to their fullest extent, you're going to move where your body already moves the most, which is going to be through your lower back. So we want to kind of safeguard that. We want to keep the back in a stable position while we get maximal stretch through the hamstring tissue. So a really easy way to do that, and something that you can do in a group setting, is have the athlete lay on his or her back. And from there, what we're going to have them do is just keeping their knee locked, bring their leg up until they feel a little bit of a stretch. Now Zach here has a little bit of tension in his hamstrings, pretty obvious. Ideally, I'd want to see an athlete very easily be able to get to 80 or 90 degrees. He's already hitting a decent amount of tension at this point. So one thing that you can do is have one athlete place their shoulder at the other athlete's ankle. And then what we can do is, Zach, go ahead and push your foot down into my shoulder. Good, keep pushing. Come on, crush my shoulder. Keep pushing, keep pushing. So you're going to have the athlete who's laying down on the ground pushing hard against the athlete who's supporting them, and then go ahead and relax that. And then we can take the slack out, and notice how we've gained potentially an extra 15 to 20 degrees range of motion when we do that. Go ahead and try that again. Push against me. Good, come on, crush my shoulder. Keep pushing down. So he's pushing down pretty hard right now. We're going to hold that for about 10 to 15 seconds. And go ahead and relax. Good. And then we take the slack out. And notice just in that short period of time how much further range of motion that we've got. So then we can take him, immediately put him into a deadlift or something like that that requires a lot of hamstring mobility. And now he's got a new range of motion to train within. And that's the best way to really lock it in and make sure that this hamstring range of motion doesn't just go back to where it was, an hour or two later. It's the greatest way to solidify it so that it stays there for the long haul.